Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Introduction to Unwanted Contact and Online Grooming webinar. It's the second webinar in the series of webinars that Catholic Professional Standards Ltd and the National Council of Churches are running on the topic of grooming in our formal partnership. And co-hosting and with us we have Laura, who's the National Coordinator for the Safe Church program.
Hi, everyone.
And also Mr. David Wiley, the Senior Investigator for the eSafety Commissioner.
Nice to be here.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Laura. So as I said, welcome. We've got participants from representing all diverse faith groups, and it is a true ecumenical audience from all around the country, but also internationally. So thank you for joining in, and we hope that today is informative and you really find value in it. Before we get into the slides, I'll give a bit of housekeeping and a bit of an introduction into the platform and some things to be mindful of. There is a chat function, which a lot of you have already taken the opportunity to introduce yourselves and say hi. Fantastic. You can send a private message to myself, Laura, or David if you have a question or something that you would like responded to. So be mindful of whether it's a personal or a group comment. Also throughout the webinar, I will have a few polls, which are basically questions that I'll pose to all of you throughout the session to get a sense of how we're tracking, how we're feeling, and some responses to the content. So most often where there's an opportunity, I'll let you know that I've released the poll and get you to respond, and they'll be open for a couple of minutes, and then we'll close them. So just be mindful of the tabs that come up, whether it be a chat tab or a comment. I also will make available some links to some resources throughout the session as well, which might pop up as well, so to make you aware. Also, just want to be mindful of the content and that some of the topics and the language that we might be referring to and talking about in today's session may be a little bit uncomfortable or confronting for some of us in our faith communities. So I just wanted to flag that these are conversations that we need to have, and some of them are uncomfortable, and this is a challenging topic. But as I think about that, I'm reminded of a comment that former Commissioner in the Royal Commission to Institutional Responses, Robert Fitzgerald, made about sexual abuse, and it thrives in an environment where there's secrecy, and the perpetrator requires it, and the vulnerabilities of a child or a young person are enhanced by the secrecy of it. So as a way of addressing it, Robert's comments were, we need to have a conversation. We need to open it up and bring things into the light. So in the context of today, it's important that we are considerate of that. So with that, let's begin. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waters of the country I am on now, the Butchulla people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and young leaders of today and also the future. Also acknowledge and pay respect to any Aboriginal people who may be present with us today. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians and elders past and present of the land and waters of the country wherever you may be linking in from. Catholic Professional Standards Ltd and the National Council of Churches in Australia are committed to the ongoing work of reconciliation with our Aboriginal families and communities.
We acknowledge the lifelong trauma of abuse victims, survivors, and their families, the failures of churches in Australia to protect, believe, and respond justly to children and vulnerable adults, and the consequent breaches of community trust. We have a prayer here for you today. We're just going to put it up here. We're not going to read it out loud. It's just for your silent reflection for a minute. But as Daniel's just said, this topic can be quite confronting, and we're going to go through some content that you might just need to take a moment before we start just to center yourself and maybe take a few deep breaths and reflect on the prayer if you like. Amen.
So the purpose of today is to provide an introductory understanding about unwanted contact and online grooming. Laura, do you?
Yes, so with the permission of the eSafety Commissioner, we've drawn upon content from their website, which will be presented with today. And as Daniel mentioned, at the end of the webinar, you will receive a summary sheet, which will have all the links that we refer to, all the phone numbers. So please don't try and write them down. We've got them all provided for you at the end. Thanks for joining us. As Daniel also said, we've got a huge representation today with us from over 170 different, with 170 different people from different sectors, faith communities. We've been overwhelmed by this breadth and depth of registrations, and we thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the issue so seriously. So this is an introductory session, as you know, and we know from the registrations that some of you may have an advanced understanding, and we appreciate you joining us anyway. For those of you who've joined us to learn more and understand how you can play a vital role, thank you for working with us in the role to protect against unwanted contact and online grooming. So on the slide, we've got the purpose for today. So to provide an introductory understanding about unwanted contact and online grooming, we're going to raise awareness for our church and faith communities to better understand what unwanted contact and online grooming is, understand how online grooming works, identify who's at risk, and raise awareness about what to do if it's suspected. And we will talk to David about providing some strategies to identify, respond, and report to protect children.
Thanks, Laura. And now up on your screen is a copy of an image of an article that's been released in the last few weeks about how, in the context of coronavirus and COVID-19 restrictions, the issue of online abuse has really come to the forefront, and it's timely for us. This was one of the, I guess, driving forces behind these webinars, knowing that we do have more people online, and this is quite a disturbing article. Some things from the article that really stood out is that approximately 670 reports per month are provided to the Commission in 2019 in relation to child sexual abuse material. And those reports during the month of March 2020 have increased by 27%. And in April 2020, so last month, have increased by 37%. And before I go to the next slide, there is a quote from Julie Imam-Grant, the eSafety Commissioner, who said during the article that I think it is like bees in a hive gathering around the honey. Abusers see COVID-19 as a honeypot for them, with at-risk boys and girls spending much more time at home and online, often without supervision and often while feeling isolated and lonely. So I'm going to, as I am about to pull out some key points from that article, I'm just going to release the link to that article to you now. So if you are interested, would like to read it once we're finished, you'll see a link come up in your tab on the right-hand side. Just some key points in relation to our current situation and in response to COVID. As I mentioned, there's been an increase in March and April quite significantly, and it's something that if we think globally, in the United States, since the pandemic restrictions began, have seen an increase in 106% of reports of child sexual abuse material. The other aspect that the article talks to is regardless of the last month or so, in April, since October 2019 to March 2020, there's been an increase of 123% compared to the same period the previous year. So this is a trend that's increasing. And another point was that, yes, we are aware that most child abusers are men, but half of those perpetrators, or near on half, had families and children. So, David, while we got you, I think it's a great opportunity to ask you, in relation to your role with the eSafety Commissioner, is what the article has presented in relation to COVID-19. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that you're seeing?
What we're seeing and drawing to the points of an increase, and I think we've seen, because we deal with an international community in relation to, I guess, the removal of child abuse or sexual abuse content. We're seeing an increase across the world at this time in relation to content that's being seen and actions taken to remove it. For the past year, we're coming up to 12,000 investigations into web pages that contain CSAM. This is an increase of on about 8,500 we did the year before. So what we're seeing is understanding that there's sexual predators online that have more time now due to being restricted to their movement at home to go through content that they have and upload it to the worldwide audience, as well as also their demand has increased for further content. And we understand that they know that there's more and more children spending more time online at home and in places where they can engage with to produce or get them to groom them to a point where they can produce more child sexual abuse material for their sexual abuse or predator audience. It's very concerning, and we're aware of direct chat about that on certain forums on the dark web, and that it reaches into people's access, I guess, to the clear web and the free web, because that's where most of the content is uploaded and shared.
Thanks, David.
Great. So you've spoken a bit there about the increasing investigations. So we've got some international people listening, and I've heard that they're from Indonesia. We've got people there from Indonesia. So have you got, can you speak into the context, like that comparative context between Australia and internationally a little bit more?
Look, our what we see is complaints that are provided or complained to us from Australian residents. So what we're seeing is what Australian residents are seeing. And we also investigate web pages for further child sexual abuse content. What we're seeing is, and I can't relate it specifically to countries because it's often difficult to determine where the victims of this abuse are originating from or where the content is being uploaded to. There's a number of countries that predominantly host more of this material than others. And that's just due to their infrastructure and their network capabilities rather than, countries that don't have that yet. But we're seeing, increase in trends of where content is hosted. And if you could extrapolate, some of the background scenes and the, ethnic backgrounds of the children, you find that there's increasing victims in this type of offences or abuse outside of more traditional areas.
Right. We will come back to the Q&A with David. So, maybe just one more question on this article, but we will come back to our Q&A with you, David, and we've got a lot of questions to put to you. But as far as that online predators and that quote that Daniel's put up there around, partners and perpetrators in families,
Yep.
do you have any advice for anyone who who suspects or has concerns about their partner, or if there would be any red flags you might want to talk about?
What we know about, child sexual abuse is it's the opportunity of the abuser to come in contact with the child, and obviously the family provides that opportunity more than any other sort of circumstance. We also know from research that it's family members or close friends of family that are generally the abusers, and most abusers are men. It's quite clear in some cases that have been reported on where persons have been arrested that their partners have some awareness of the behaviour or have concerns about their behaviour. One of the things that it's suspicious activity where the partner is spending more time or more and more time with a particular child or with children in more private circumstances, or you may come across files on your shared computer that they don't want you to access or look into, or even their browsing history may reveal their obviously their interest and what they may have been looking at in terms that if you're suspicious of, and you probably have good reason to, if there's something that they're trying to conceal from partner, that obviously raises your concerns and your suspicions, and it's something that you should be mindful that something, not all cases untoward happening, but would you like to have an open discussion about what they're doing online as well, and what, and we know that children that are abused in family contents can also be shared amongst networks, close to those abusers. And so that sort of behaviour where you get, I guess, children that are encouraged to, I guess, spend time at a particular household or in the company of a particular person, that may start to raise your concerns or awareness that something untoward or abusive is possibly happening, or that child is being groomed to be abused at a later point.
Thanks, David. Just before we move on, are you able to share some, I guess, explain to some who may not be aware what the dark web is?
Well, the dark web is accessible by anybody who has a certain browser that allows them to access the servers that use the dark web. So anybody can download a browser and then access the content. What the dark web provides is an anonymity towards the content, like where it's hosted. So because the way the information is shared, the end nodes don't relate to a particular location. So it's difficult to find out where content is being hosted or where it's being uploaded from. But the dark web relies, I guess, most people access what's the clear web or the clean web in their day-to-day activities, and most content is shared on the clean web, but it also is then provided to the dark web, and the dark web also provides links to clear web content as well.
Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you.
Just before you move on, Daniel, just quickly, we're going to introduce Kelly a bit later on, but you can see that Kelly Bricknell is responding to some of those questions, and she is joining us from the eSafety Commissioner. Kelly's the Manager of Education and Training, and she'll be on here for the whole chat. But if you can see Kelly responding, she's with the eSafety Commissioner. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Laura. And I think the last question that I have for you, David, is would you agree that before COVID hit, the article infers that there's been an increase anyway? Is this the trend that you've seen, that this was increasing and COVID has obviously exacerbated some of that?
Look, we are seeing an increase across, I guess, in relation to all sort of offences towards children online. Like eSafety has investigative arms that relate to cyberbullying and cyber abuse, and cyberbullying is the cyber abuse cyberbullying of a child. And I guess just as more and more children start to use online apps and engage with each other online, and I guess wider community online, I guess they're bringing themselves into more instances of where harm can occur, and not all of them have the resilience, or not all of them have the awareness to realize that that's what's occurring to them until it starts to affect them both emotionally and psychologically. So yeah, and this content is this child sexual abuse content. The amount available online is appalling, and it's growing every year, and that's occurring across the world as I guess more countries that are developing their internet technology, and more people are connected to internet technology in their home. It's just the demand for child sexual material is strong, and those then countries, the people in those countries obviously come under pressure, I guess, potentially, or come into contact with people who can offer them sort of financial reward or something to produce this material, and then the demand for new material, is increasing.
Yes, thanks, David. So we might hear from you throughout the slides as well. And as Laura said, we've got a Q&A. So thank you very much. Laura.
Yeah. So for most of you listening, you're well aware of the National Principles for Child Safe Organisations. So we've got some links at the end of the webinar for the national principles, but principle number 8 directly addresses the physical and online environments minimise the opportunity for abuse to occur. So we know a number of you are out there either looking at your state child safe standards, or a lot of you are looking at the national principles. So just as a reminder, we've got the slide up here for you for standard number 8 and the core components around that. The risks in the online and physical environments are identified and mitigated without compromising a child's right to privacy and healthy development. And the online environment is used in accordance with the institution's code of conduct and relevant policies. And thank you to the denominations I've touched base with to give us examples of their policy templates that they've developed. So these are core components, and they highlight the need for organisations to have a strong code of conduct outlining expected behaviours for members in face-to-face delivery as well as online. There's also a need for organisations to have these policies and procedures which reflect safe online use. And as David and Daniel and I will talk later, you know, we've all been pushed into the online space because of COVID especially. So, Daniel.
Thanks, Laura. Yes, and we've also got the National Catholic Safeguarding Standards there to show the alignment, and if you drill down into the indicators that go along with that, it'll speak directly to where this sits within the context of responding to the standards and aligning with the principles. Thank you, Laura. I've put a poll out, which many of you have already responded to. So if you've seen that pop up and you haven't had a chance to respond, please do, because I'll be ending it very shortly. You will see some questions come up from time to time, as I mentioned. They're called polls. We do have a short video that we've been granted permission from Bravehearts to show you all in this session today. Bravehearts have produced a fantastic educational video about grooming. Now, this is not specific to the online context, but we felt that as we lead into more specific content and information about the online environment, that it'd be helpful to have a bit of an overview of grooming. And this video that only goes for a couple of minutes is a fantastic one. So thank you to Bravehearts for allowing us to use this in our training. What I'm making a link available to you now is a link to Bravehearts training page. They have a lot of great training available, and so if you want to have a look at that and see whether some of that training is applicable, I would encourage you to do so. So you're going to see Laura, David, and my videos go off for a bit as we play this video, and then we'll come back. So if we want to just close our videos and our microphones. Sorry about that. There seems to be an issue with that video. It's been disabled, unfortunately. It's not working. So what I have got is the link actually to that video. So at very worst, at least if you click on it, you'll be able to watch it in your own time. So I'm going to make that available to you now. So my apologies.
So while Daniel's doing that, we'll just move on to what unwanted contact is. So unwanted contact is any type of online communication that your child finds unpleasant or confronting, or that leads them into a situation where they may be unsafe. This can happen even if the initial contact is welcomed. It can come from strangers, online friends. Your child may have met them face-to-face or someone they actually know, and it can be from anyone. People that are known in person or people that are online, known in that environment, or it will be strangers. It can be something that is initially welcomed and then escalates.
Thanks, Laura. So how does online grooming work? Grooming involves building a relationship with a child or young person in order to abuse them. Groomers can use sophisticated strategies to gain access and the trust of children and young people online. They frequent sites that children and young people use, sometimes pretending to be young people themselves in order to trick children into chatting or sharing information with them. They may be adults, they also may be under 18 themselves and groom younger children, or they could be another young person that's coerced by an adult into obtaining sexual images of another child. They use personal information that they've gathered about a child to develop a connection with them. And as the relationship grows and things escalate, the child can become comfortable sharing more information about themselves. So it does escalate and somewhat spiral. We mentioned at the beginning about secrecy. A key tactic is building secrecy into the relationship, aiming to physically and emotionally separate the child or young person from their family and friends. They do test and gauge how willing the child is to engage in activities, particularly sexual activities. And I guess important in this is to recognise that some young people may use the internet as a way to explore their own sexuality. And at the beginning, some of this contact may be welcomed and they may be open to online contact of a sexual nature to facilitate this. They share explicit material. They may ask for an intimate image of a child, and they can use this once they have gained an intimate image or some intimate information. They could use this as a tool to pressure the child to send more material, or even to maybe meet in person. I want to make a note here that there is a guide specifically in relation to sending nudes and sexting from the eSafety Commissioner, which is a great resource for parents and carers. And there is a link to that in that summary material, which we'll send to you all after the session. But just to note, there is a specific guide from the eSafety Commissioner that goes into a lot of detail about this.
Daniel, if I might just interject, I guess with the grooming activity and sexual predators, what we know is that this is targeted behavior, and these sexual predators are rehearsing each time they come in contact with a child to see what works and what doesn't work. So they're building their knowledge base on how they engage children and how, I guess, they can exploit them in ways. And to do that, they research the child that they're targeting. This can be through, because most children have maybe multiple social media accounts, and those children obviously post and upload very, I guess, private and personal information that they probably think is just designed for their friends or people that they know, so they know what they're doing, what they're up to. But if their accounts that they're using aren't set to private or they're public accounts, then anybody can potentially access these posts and build a profile of the child, so they know whether they target them. They can have some direct or imply some direct awareness of they know them, or they know them through a friend, and they know they did this on the weekend, or they're catching up with this person, these other people's their friend. And I guess that tries to disarm that child that they're focused on, because they think they may not know them directly, but they know them through their friends, so this person's potentially okay. So then they may not have the fear to engage them and talk to them or respond to them, at certain times of the day, because that's, I guess, the groomer looks to remove the child from a more public a setting into a more private one, and maybe contact them multiple times a day, and then start to get them to do things that may not be sexual initially, but just shows, I guess, that child's willingness to perform a task to bring about some sort of reward that's been potentially offered to them. So it just reinforces the trust and in the relationship, and then the behaviour then escalates.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. Feel free to jump in, and we'll come back to some of those points that you made, David, just then, especially around the desensitising and trying to get through those, just testing the boundaries. So let's have a look at some of when the risk increases with children and young people. So we've got, if the children and young person post personal details like their full name or school or on a social networking site without using privacy controls, this means the information is accessible to people who could use it to build an inappropriate relationship, as David was just saying. If the child or young person accepts contacts or friend requests from people they don't know, this allows strangers to access their personal information and images. If the child or young person responds to an anonymous user on an app or a website.
Yeah, to continue on the risks, when a child or a young person visits sites targeted or aimed for adults, and we know that there is a lot of children and young people on things like Facebook, Instagram, and other social media, but particularly online dating or online chat or gaming sites as well. So this increases the likelihood of a child or young person being contacted by older teens or adults for sexual purposes. Another risk is when children or young people post sexy photos or messages that may be suggestive in a sexual way, or even using screen names. And we know that a lot of young people and children see this as being maybe more mature or having a laugh, but it is a risk in attracting dangerous people.
Thanks, Daniel. So David, feel free to jump in here. And again, the content on this side particularly, just to reinforce, it is taken from the eSafety Commissioner, and they are running webinars on this content. So if we list through any of these things and you don't know how to go about doing these, please have a look on the eSafety website. They go through this in their webinars. So if someone's contacting a child, your child or a child in your children's ministry, and this contact is unwanted or makes them feel uncomfortable, here are some of the things to do. Make their accounts private. For younger children, ensure their social media accounts are not publicly available and establish rules around what types of content they should share online. For older children, suggest they make their social media accounts private or revise their privacy settings so they can control who can look at their photos and their posts. By adjusting their privacy settings, they can stay in control of who sees what, and who sees their posts online. And I'm sure a number of you out there have got your own Facebook accounts as well. So some of this is, you would know how to do this anyway. Delete contacts that they don't talk to. Encourage your child or young person to delete contacts that they don't talk to. Ask them to go through all of the people who follow them or they are friends with on their social media and check that they actually know them. Report and block. Let your child know that they can talk to you at any time if they receive any contact that is inappropriate or makes them feel uncomfortable. And there are steps that you can take to do this. If your child receives any unwanted contact from someone they know or a stranger, encourage them to report and block this person on the site or service used to contact them. Again, the eSafety guide is in our summary sheet and it has online safety information and direct reporting links. If the contact persists or it becomes aggressive or threatening, contact the police. And obviously delete requests from strangers.
I think the key point there is that there are so many social networking apps available for children. There's also sort of a new one that's the most fashionable from week to week, or their friends are using, so everyone wants to join it and use it. The key there is for the parent or guardian or someone to sit down with the child and check the app and check the privacy and security settings they've got in place on the app, because most of them don't default to a private setting. They're public or it's limited privacy. So anything that it's uploaded to that child's account or your own account can be, if it's just public setting, anybody can access it and through that network. And that's a real concern, knowing that anything your child is uploading, if they think they're uploading it to their friends, anybody can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I noticed in your eSafety guide, you go through all of those, like TikTok, and goes through all of them. So please, everyone, have a good look at those.
And also, like, there's chat sites, and kids are, like chat sites. Quick, you can involve a lot of people. But there's chat sites. Meagle is one that comes to mind that pretty much has no. Everything's anonymous, so you don't know who you're talking to. And even if you come across offensive behaviour online, there's no contact on the web page to report that to. So that's obviously very concerning to parents, and there's high risk there engaging in contact with a person that is, could be pretending to be anybody, and you have no idea where they are located, who they are, and you're engaging with them, in the privacy of your bedroom or whatnot. Yeah, you're very vulnerable in that sort of circumstance.
Thanks, David. I'll just highlight that there is a poll open now asking if, in light of what we're talking about, have you ever suspected someone in your faith community of acting inappropriately in the online environment? So I'll leave that open for a few more minutes. Some good responses. So if we're thinking about some strategies or some things that we can put in place to protect children, centrally is to stay involved in the child or the young person's digital world. So keep up to date with the sites. As David mentioned, there's a new one every week, it seems. So there's a bit of homework there. You need to be on the front foot with what apps and online chat services children and young people are using, and look for ways to explore them together. Consider whether you are comfortable with the content on the sites, and if there's a potential for contact with others, including adults. So make that assessment. Make sure that you're aware of what actually goes on in these apps. If you do have concerns that the children or young people are visiting sites that they haven't told you about, have the conversation. It's something that's going to come up a lot. Try to talk to them about it. Talk to them about your concern. And as a backup, you could look at the internet browsing history. But the aim is to really have an environment, build an environment where trust and open dialogue is common, and you're able to have these discussions, these hard, challenging conversations, and try to be aware of who the children and young people are socialising with in the real world, and if there's differences, and who are the ones that they're only socialising with or interacting with in the virtual world, and getting a sense of who they are. Build an open and trusting relationship. So as I mentioned, keep communication open and calm, and try and let the children and young people know that they can come to you and ask you questions if something doesn't feel right for them. That they need to feel comfortable about telling you if they have done something that they regret, or if someone is pressuring them or making them feel uncomfortable in the online environment. Help children and young people to protect their privacy. Something that's come up a lot, and David, you mentioned privacy a lot there in relation to apps, and a lot of them are set to default, which are public. But as parents and guardians or carers, that we need to take more of an active role in guiding children and young people about privacy settings and how they're to be used, and what they are set to in social media sites, and where possible, restricting the availability to their friends only, so it isn't public. Explain to children that they shouldn't be sending photographs of themselves and sharing personal information, that they should be using only a first name or a nickname, and not to identify themselves on chat, social media, their phone number, their addresses, their school, any of that personal information that could be used to identify who that is, and that personal information. There is a guide that the eSafety Commission has put up about privacy. It's been mentioned. It will be in that resource pack. I encourage you to have a look at it. It is a great tool. And then lastly, on this slide anyway, that you teach children and young people to be more alert to signs of what is inappropriate contact. That children are being able to recognise signs that an online friend may be trying to develop an inappropriate relationship. Even if that relationship began in a welcomed and inviting way at the beginning, that children can be alert to warning signs. Young people may be particularly vulnerable if they are starting to explore their sexuality through the online environment. And so that's something that we need to be mindful of. That is a reality. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that this can be somewhat of a challenging topic for our faith communities, but particularly young people, they will be exploring their sexuality and sexual activities through the online environment. So we need to be aware of that. So there is another guide, particularly for parents, around online pornography and the hard to have conversations. So it is a great guide, and just wanted to note there, it will be part of that resourcing, but to check that out in relation to these challenging conversations. As far as some warning signs, what are some warning signs to look out for, flags? If someone asks a lot of questions about personal information, so very early on in the meeting, in the online environment, they're wanting to know personal details and a lot of questions, it's a warning sign. Why are they asking these questions? If a person who has contacted the child or young person starts asking them for favours or offering them things in return, some clear warning signs there. Often abusers will promise gifts, favours, as a mechanism to gain trust. Very classic grooming behaviour. And if the person who has made contact wants to try and keep that relationship secret, another critical key warning sign.
So, yeah, sorry, Daniel, over to you.
That's okay. So it's just continuing some of the warning signs. Someone contacts a child or young person frequently and through different mechanisms, through different sites, different forms, like texting or through Instagram or online chat services, it's another warning sign. If they ask the child or the young person things like, who else uses the computer? Who else is around? What room is the computer in? Some quick questions that will make you wonder, why are they wanting to know this information? If they compliment the child or young person on their appearance or body, or ask things like, have you ever been kissed? It's trying to make this conversation get sexualized and touch on vulnerabilities. And particularly if they insist on meeting. If they try and make the child guilty or even threaten them if they're unwilling. Some really classic flags there and warning signs to be mindful of.
Okay, let's have a look at some of the steps to take when things go wrong. And I was looking at this before. Stay calm and reassure your child they are not in trouble. And I know for many parents or people that have been in children, youth and family ministry before, when a child tells you something, you have that internal, oh my goodness, but stay calm and reassure your child they're not in trouble. You want to keep the communication open. Explain that even adults get tricked into doing things that they regret. Talk to them without being judgmental or angry, and make them feel like they can come to you with anything without fear of being punished or criticised. The eSafety says, do not cut off your child's internet access, as they may see this as punishment and not open to you in the future. You want to avoid the child or young person not coming to you about and going offline and having friendships that become compromising or difficult. You want to avoid them feeling ashamed or embarrassed to come to you. It might make things worse. Remember that that's what online groomers rely on. The child or young person may have also welcomed the initial contact until it made them feel uncomfortable. Again, if you're in a ministry role with children or young people, you can be that extra set of eyes and ears for parents. Don't forget that. Be alert to worrying changes in the child or young person's behaviour. Watch for signs of withdrawal, anxiety, sadness, or changed interactions with family and friends, classic behaviour. If the child or young person is being bullied online, again, eSafety has a whole guide for you around cyberbullying for parents and carers. And obviously, especially this information is something that you can be working in your children's and family ministries with young people and parents around. If the child or young person has provided a photo or given information to someone that they are concerned about, or if they're being pressured to do so, there are things that you can do. So the things that you can do, let's go through the steps. So 1, stay calm. 2, we're acting to protect the child, obviously. Call the police immediately on 000 if their physical safety is at risk, and get professional help and support through Kids Helpline or eHeadspace. All the details are in the summary sheet for you. So the third one is collecting evidence. And David, you might want to speak to this one when we go into the Q&A, because I know there's some nuances here.
Yep.
So collect evidence. The eSafety says, if the material involves sexualised images, be aware that possessing or sharing these images of people under 18 may be a crime, even if you've just taken a screenshot. Before you or the child or young person blocks or deletes posts or other material, take the screenshot and collect the evidence, including dates and times. For information about the relevant laws in Australia, you can visit Youth Law Australia. You can also read about intimate images and the law in the eSafety guide, as Daniel's already mentioned, around sending nudes and sexting. Once again, all this information is in the summary sheet for you at the end. So number 4, reporting. Grooming and procuring of children over the internet are crimes investigated by the police. If you have encountered this kind of activity online, contact your local police station. David, feel free to jump in here if you want to add to any of these comments. Help your child block the person who has made them feel uncomfortable and report the unwanted contact to the social media platform. The eSafety guide has links to report abusive content and online safety centres. If you would like to make an anonymous report, you can call Crime Stoppers, and you can report online grooming to the AFP's Child Protection Operation on the AFP website. So you can find out more about online grooming reports on the Think You Know website.
Thanks, Laura. We're about to take a very short break, and before we do, I just thought, and if there isn't anything, that's fine, create a space. David, is there anything that you wanted to add? We're getting some great comments coming in on the chat. Just as far as some key things that we've talked about, ways to respond, or anything in particular about the online grooming space and content that might be helpful before we take a short break.
Yeah, look, just on the reporting and, sort of encouraging people where they are experiencing, I guess, harmful or hurtful contact, is the first place is to ignore, never respond to that communication, because that just, I guess, shows that you're willing to engage with them on some level, and then they may then, start apologising, and it's all, I guess, a game for them to encourage you to converse with them further. But most apps, or the apps that you're using, most of the mainstream apps, all have in-app reporting, so you can report the account that you feel that's sending inappropriate content, and you can also report inappropriate content as well. It's also to be mindful, if you find something online content that you find offensive or hurtful, is not to share that content with other people, because you're just perpetuating that harm, online harm, to a wider audience. With relation to capturing evidence, the easiest way is a quick screen grab, particularly on a mobile device or a tablet, because a lot of this, particularly in chat platforms, that content doesn't persist. So once that chat ends, that content is not always available for the police or whoever's investigating the matter to verify. So it's a good idea, if you experience some offensive content that's shown to you, just to screen grab it, and then you can report that and supply that information later.
Thanks, David. Some great advice there. So what we will come back. I just wanted to highlight that we do have Kelly Britnell in the background. He's doing a wonderful job answering and responding to questions. So keep the chat coming through. Keep your questions coming through to us, and we will try and make this as an opportunity to respond to everybody. So we should have come up big on the screen now. And David, just before we start, and it might have probably been helpful to bring you in right at the beginning, but can you tell us a little bit about your role with the eSafety Commissioner, and as the senior investigator and also a bit more of your experience in this context.
Okay, yep. So I'm a senior investigator with the cyber report team for eSafety. We investigate online content that is harmful or illegal. So how it works is that we receive complaints from the Australian public. We investigate those URLs or web page information and to determine whether the material displayed on those web pages is likely to be illegal and harmful content. And then we take action. We're a part of a worldwide community known as InHope that has hotlines in 42 countries. We direct takedown notifications through that network to the host providers of the content, and they have a fairly high rate of removal of content over a short period of time. The cyber report works in with as an investigation team arm of the eSafety Commissioner. We work in with cyber bullying and the cyber abuse team and the image-based abuse team. And the image-based abuse team is the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. So a lot of the times we share information and we work towards basically just trying to increase people's awareness of their vulnerabilities whilst online, and then help them in their need to remove harmful content.
Right, thanks, David.
Thanks, David. So can we go back to the article? That article was sent in to us to have a look at in light of our conversation with you, and it's quite alarming. The heading was so alarming. Can you talk us through the COVID context particularly, and if there's anything been coming up or specifically exposed that hasn't been addressed in that article that you could shed some light on?
Well, I guess what COVID, the restrictions that have forced upon most people is to remain indoors and not go about doing the things that we would normally do. That obviously places increased pressure on the dynamics of your household or where you've been spending that time. And it also provides you with, other time or less time doing the things that you would normally do, say with children with school, and then looking at other ways for them to occupy themselves. And if you're a working parent from home or whatnot, and you also, you've got time commitments as well, and you don't have, enough time to spend with them to keep them on task, they get, they may need other activities to go on to, and you might be a little bit more looser or freer in what those activities are, just so they can contain themselves to allow you to go about your work. The problem with that is and a lot of the times now, children have a device at home already, or are then probably spending more and more time on that device, and probably becoming a little bit more inquisitive, or they're tired of seeing the same sort of content they're allowed to view. So if they're given that free time and a reduced supervision, they might be more willing to explore other sites. And it doesn't take long to go from a sort of a relatively innocent web page, particularly on YouTube, a relatively innocent video. You get all these little pop-ups that come, and they like to click on things, and that can take them to places where they don't want to go. And once they're there, that content can't be unseen. It's highly offensive, and it leaves a longer lasting negative impression on them.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Do you have any comment about specific vulnerabilities, or even who is at the highest risk?
Obviously, when we're talking about children, the laws in Australia, a child is a person under 18. The content that we see, and the InHope content as a whole, 90% of the child sexual abuse material we see depicts a child under 13. So when you think about that, it shows that child, or that age group, is particularly vulnerable. And you consider why is that so? It's because they're probably physically they're less developed, so they can't defend themselves. They're probably more vulnerable, that no one, they can't say they don't want to do something. They might feel obliged to act in a more pleasing or gratifying way. So anything that's suggested to them, they might be fearful of saying no. And they're also, far more easily manipulated because of their, emotional immaturity at that point in their lives. And but they don't have the opportunity to if they go to seek help, they're probably more likely to be not believed than if they were an older child that probably has more reliable, I guess, or perceived to have more reliable memory, or is not doing it for any other purpose.
So David, the eSafety offers all your resourcing and webinars and things like that. But as you know, this webinar is particularly for faith communities. Is there anything that you want to highlight, or common themes or scenarios specifically for the faith community in relation to online grooming or unwanted contact?
Faith communities, provide a support network. They're places where people go to. They believe there's a high level of trust in those communities, and they can talk to about things. And I guess those people in those positions of authority in those communities, should not, I guess, dismiss any time that they're approached about this sort of content, because maybe they feel uncomfortable, like we've raised, about talking about it or dealing with it. Because quite often the person telling about the abuse, they've gone through the abuse, they've suffered a lot, and then to talk to somebody in a position where they think they can trust, that they can trust and get a sort of a caring and understanding response, and so they get dismissed, or they're denied, or they're accused of lying about it or not to talk about it, that really puts a lot more pressure on that child to speak up again about the matter. So yeah, faith group-based communities have a crucial role to play in those communities, and they should be aware of I guess, the warning signs and particular behaviours within those interactions, and building in strong guidelines about how, I guess, children and adults interact in those groups.
Thanks.
Continuing on the theme in relation to speaking to the context of our faith communities, given, as we've mentioned, that this may be difficult, what would you say to those who say this isn't happening? It doesn't happen in our faith communities. It's something that our children aren't engaged in these activities.
I think it's very risky and irresponsible behaviour to have that sort of mindset, because you're really shutting down the possibility that it is occurring. And then if someone, just going back on the previous point, where someone comes to you for help and guidance, and then to be denied the opportunity to be believed, I think that's quite, undermines that person's, I guess, self-esteem and wellness. And the statistics, report on, I guess, the percentage of children that are abused across whole populations, and we must then be quite ignorant for us to say that doesn't occur in our community, particularly if 1 in 10 females is the subject of child sexual abuse. To think that doesn't occur then in that smaller environment, well, I think that's quite irresponsible and yeah, not serving the needs of the child.
So just to, as Daniel said, this can be quite difficult for faith communities. So I guess we tried to field some questions prior, but this is a tricky one, and I guess I'm just going to put it straight to you. But can you talk about how groomers manipulate children into performing sexual acts in the online environment?
Well, with any, I guess, abusive relationship, there's an element of risk of the abuser being exposed. So for them to minimize that risk, it's all about, I guess, controlling and manipulating, in this case, the child, to a point where they feel like if they came forward, they would not be trusted, that there's no one will believe them. So denying their cries for help is very concerning. I guess the relationship involves opportunity. If there anywhere there's an opportunity for, I guess, an adult to gain, or a sexual predator to gain access to children, well, then there's a high risk of predatory behaviour occurring, and ultimately a child being sexually abused as a result of that.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Another question, I think this is one that we fielded from a couple of people that send in questions, is asking the question that's somewhat rhetorical, and I'll add an additional, but can this happen whilst children and young people are online at home on their own device, with parents or or family members close by? And is this something that's common? And last point to that is, if so, do you have any advice to parents or carers in that type of situation?
Yeah, we see a lot of child sexual abuse material that's generated in the bedroom of a child. So that's non-contact abuse, where the child is performing sexual acts or poses into the webcam of the laptop or tablet. And that's occurring, no doubt, while the parents or other family members are at home and in close contact. So we see a lot of content that's produced that shows the child in their bedroom, it would seem, and that obviously reveals a lot of information about the child. It can do, particularly if there's a school badge or emblem that's being displayed. There might be posters indicating what the child likes, and which can be used against them, and also I guess in bathrooms. And there's areas where straight up you wouldn't think that they're private places where you give a bit more latitude for your child to be in those places for longer periods of time, but there's obviously concerns there if your child's repeatedly spending more and more time into those locations, and their behavior, I guess, about them at the time indicates that something may be untoward's happening, or they're engaging in communication that they want to keep secret. So they're places that they can retreat to, whether they think they're safe from their parents' interruption, or so they can, I guess, they've been coerced to perform certain things at certain times in those locations.
And I guess to add on to that, in your experience, and given we've got a captive faith audience, David, would children from faith communities and backgrounds be engaging in this kind of online activity and risky behaviour?
Yeah, the short answer would be yes. But every child is, similar in they enjoy communicating with their friends. They enjoy, playing games online. They enjoy a lot of things on the online environment, and that can be super positive ways for a child to learn and get a greater understanding of things and to grow in confidence themselves. But then they're faced with the same vulnerabilities. They are, as an inquisitive, they're looking for different opportunities to explore, and we've talked about, I guess, children when they become of age where they're more sexually aware of their bodies, and they're looking to explore that, and if they feel uncomfortable about talking to their family or immediate friends, and then they look to communities where they can discuss, I guess, those feelings, and sometimes they're taking to chat lines or web pages or sites or social media groups that they can do that, but there runs the risk of people or predators in those groups that are aware of these vulnerabilities and know when children are vulnerable, and I guess know when to target them using those vulnerabilities.
Thanks, David. Something that's come up a couple of times in the chat, and I just wondered if you, and some of it I feel you may have spoken to, so maybe we might look at a different way to approach this, is some practical ways that those who are overseeing children and young people might be able to monitor or put in place to help monitor the online environment that children and young people are interacting in.
Sure. I think first and foremost, the most important thing is know what the child is doing online. That doesn't take too much time to sit with them, or just be aware of what they're doing, who they're doing it with, what apps they're on, and what else. It doesn't take much time to, I guess, obviously you want to trust your child to use a device without too much intrusion from you, and it's getting to that point where I guess they have to almost prove that they can be trusted on a device and look at only the things that you've discussed using for them to achieve that. So it's the early on phases where they're gaining access to a new app that they haven't used before, or they're probably impatient. They just want to get on and start sharing photos with their friends and things like that. But you really need to sit with them and just make them aware of, I guess, the consequences of if they post an image online to somebody, that image can be captured by that end user, and that image then can be shared out of that environment as many times as possible, which children probably aren't aware of. They probably just want to share what I'm doing now and get some instant gratification from that, share it with their friends. They all enjoy that that feeling that they're doing things that everyone enjoys, particularly on TikTok. But if that behavior can also expose them to images being shared of them that they wouldn't like to have happened. So I guess it's just all about establishing clear guidelines and what activities they're doing, what they're engaged in, and make sure everyone sticks to that, because it's when they start being, I guess, children, or start being secretive about their online use, that's when the risks obviously increase.
Yeah. So this question's come in prior to the webinar, and there's a couple of different parts to it. So I'll just talk through those different parts. So the first part of it is, many parents from a particular context believe that groomers are manipulating children online with the aim of meeting up in real life. Can you discuss that?
Yes, and it probably applies to older children, only because they have, I guess, a bit more independence to be able to probably leave the house on their own without raising suspicion. So very mindful of that, particularly a lot of dating apps and things where kids may be pretending to be of an age that they're not, older, engage in people, and then they're engaged in a conversation that they've lost control with, and then they probably start to get manipulated and pressured to meet up. Otherwise, often used as a threat by the abuser to, start telling all their friends and family that they've been engaged in this conduct and embarrass them. So in order to not do that, then they have to go and do something else for them. Obviously, physical contact or contact meetings has a risk to it, particularly if you're in a public place or not. But secretive locations can be arranged, and obviously once you're in the company of a person who you think they're a particular person, turn out to be someone that they're not at all, and then obviously you've got no one there to help you. You're vulnerable. The fear involved in that sort of situation where you maybe go off to a location thinking you're going to meet someone of your own age, of your own interests. You turn up there, they're 30 years older than you. The potential to be kidnapped and taken away and abused, is extremely high.
Thanks, David. And I think this might have come up in some of the, what to do, but some practically, if someone sees an image online of a child that they feel is inappropriate, what should they do?
If you see an image online, is report it to the cyber report team. That just pretty much just requires filling out an online form and then inserting the web address or the URL that relates directly to that image. So when it's investigated, we can go straight to the page that you've seen and assess the content on there. There's a lot of, I guess, laws differ between countries about what maybe constitutes child sexual abuse material. Sexualized posing, for instance, may not be unlawful in some countries, but where it is in Australia. So if you have concerns about any material you see online that's harmful or you think is illegal, the best thing to do is report that to Cyber Report at the eSafety website. So we can, if we deem it unlawful or harmful, then we can act to remove it. If you see content, I'd say that's been saved to a file of that you think is child abuse material, the best place to report that is to the police, or you can do it anonymously to Crime Stoppers, and then provide them the information regarding that material.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a question that's come in from someone in youth ministry. So what about situations when images are sent between young people and those images then get sent more broadly? And what are the, can you talk about any comments around that?
Yeah, look, child abuse imagery is abuse imagery, and it's unlawful content regardless of who's sending it. So if a child takes a photo of them, and again, a child is a person under 18, takes a photo of them that's sexually suggestive or is sexual content, and it would be considered child sexual abuse material, then the distribution of that material is unlawful. So that's what they have to keep in mind. So the sharing of it initially, and then also be mindful that they might be sending it, if they're in a relationship, they've sent some nude images or whatever to the person in the relationship with. A lot of the times, that person who receives it particularly if the relationship ends not long after, then shares that information to their friends, to anybody, as a way of humiliating that person. So yeah, the damage, the psychological and harmful effects of that, yeah, needs to be considered.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David. This is something that's come out of that article that we referred to, which we showed the link to, and it referenced something, the phenomenon called capping.
Yep.
Can you explain what that is and what they are doing, and is there any examples that you can speak to?
Look, capping is the capturing of content. So when you're on apps and you're communicating with someone through a webcam or something, or it's a video stream, the person at the other end could just be recording that or taking screenshots of that. You have no idea. So they're capturing everything that you're transmitting across the internet, and then they can obviously transmit that or distribute that the way, because it's in their possession, it's under their control, so they can send that those images out to whoever they want. So things like we're doing vlogs, which is short little video blogs. Wherever you're posting it to, someone can screenshot it or capture that content, and then it's them to be be redistributed without any of your knowledge or control, which is obviously a big concern.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And are there any other types of activities that predators are engaging in that you want the faith community and to be aware of, that we might not be aware of, other things like capping?
I think we need to realise that predatory behaviour, they're part of a community, I guess, as well, and they educate each other, so they're aware of how to behave, how to engage children, which children potentially are more vulnerable than others. So as a community who's charged with, I guess, the safety and security of children, we really need to have the children's safety at the forefront of decisions and how we think about this type of I guess behaviour. It's about protecting the child. It's about educating ourselves as well as every child to how to stay safe or be safer online, and to be aware of their vulnerabilities and to avoid or distance themselves or prevent sort of unwanted contact. Evolves, particularly as new apps or new social media platform evolves. There's always a community probably within that, in certain groups on that are looking to get target children, obtain child abuse material and share that. So every time a new app comes along, and children, if children know about a particular app that's trending or it's very popular, too well that the child abuse predators also know that those apps are popular amongst children. So no doubt they're on those apps as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. We are coming towards the end. We've got only 5-6 minutes left. So I might ask a parting question, but before I do, Kelly's responded to some key questions that have come up that I thought I'd highlight, just in case people aren't watching the chat. The CEOP in the UK and Think You Know, website run by the AFP, have got some great videos in response to if there are any videos that might be good tool to show young people or children about the danger of grooming. So thank you, Kelly. And Kelly's also put a link there to the eSafety Commissioner's website there in relation to cyber smart reporting and cyber reporting. So in relation to that comment about how to send through a report or what to do if you see something inappropriate or have a concern. So thank you, Kelly. I guess as a parting, given we've only got 5 minutes left, is there anything that you'd say, what can faith communities do to help protect a child? We've talked about some practical things. Is there anything else in relation to the faith context that you'd want to leave us with, as we start to wrap this up?
Yeah, I like to think that the faith community, is not afraid to talk about this, is to be proactive in this space and really encourage talk amongst yourselves about how the vulnerabilities of children in the online space, and I guess be aware of the issues that children face. And when a child or a parent of a child wants to talk to you about something that they think is worth talking to you about, any sort of harmful content that their child has been exposed to, or untoward behaviour that may be coming from within the group itself, is not to be discouraged from talking about it, and make sure that you listen and what you can do about it, because you rather do, I guess, something about it than not do anything about it, and know, in 10 years' time that child was abused at that particular moment where they tried to reach out for help and they were turned away. So that's probably the biggest concern. It's the child safety that's the most important here. We need to navigate this space together, and we need to be there to listen to each other when one of us comes into contact with something that is harmful to them, and we need to listen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that. So I'm going to bring the slides back up. And just to note that Kelly has sent that link to reporting, and the first link was the link to a video on unwanted online contact and grooming. So, Laura.
So just for everyone's information, it will be on the summary sheet. Grooming is a criminal offence. And for more information about grooming legislation in your state and territory, go to your regulatory body's website in each state and territory. But for your information, we have provided all the state and territory oversight bodies on the summary sheet and the relevant legislation. Then, as a final mention and a special thank you to the eSafety Commission, we just also want to remind you that the eSafety has also been running webinars on child safety and online learning for organisations. These webinars provide overviews to help organisations assess online risks, set online safety behavioural expectations, create risk mitigation strategies, know how and when to report, and find links. So we've touched on that today, but please, it's the eSafety's role. That's what they're all about. They've got some wonderful resources and webinars happening. And a special note that if you have over 50 people, the eSafety can provide a webinar at a time that's convenient for you and your faith community. So maybe you want to do that at any ministries. And we've got the contact details on the summary sheet for you at the end.
Yeah, fantastic. Something that I hope that a lot of our faith communities who are here take up. As we do come to a close, just being mindful of the content, and if it has been disturbing to you, or you would just like someone to talk through, there are some support services available. We've listed a couple here. They will also be on that summary sheet. But just know that there are services out there that you can ring and speak to support you. So take the time to check in with how you are feeling. And if you do feel that you are moved in a negative way, or this has troubled you, please reach out, and always just remind Lifeline 131114. Before we actually finish, so this is our final slide, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. Thank you for your feedback on the polls. It's been great. We do have an evaluation and feedback form that I'm going to release to you now, and it's really important that we get to hear from you and ensure that the activities and the offerings that we're providing is of value. And so please, will only take a very short minute. It's coming up now. If you click or open up a new window, so before you actually leave your computer or close out, please fill that in. That'll be sent in to us, and so that we can make sure that any other offerings or indeed follow-ups to this content is actually going to be of value. So there's Laura's contact details there, her email and phone number, and mine also email and CPSL's phone number. Thank you, everybody. We've had a lot of people coming in from all across the country, but also internationally. David, thank you so much for your input.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for the invitation and your audience for their attention.
Thanks, mate. We want to really just thank the eSafety Commissioner and the great resource that you have and available for people. And today is just an example of some of the things that you are doing to raise awareness to this issue and respond. So thank you to the eSafety Commissioner and again, David. Laura, again, thank you.
Yep. And we'll send out the summary sheet.
We will, and please everyone have a safe weekend and be more engaged with what's happening online, particularly with your own children and those that you're in care of. Okay, see you later.
Thank you, Kelly.
And thank you very much, Kelly. Cheers.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye.